and she reached for him without hesitation. He wrapped a strong arm around her waist and hoisted her up in front of him, cradling her close as he turned the horse back toward the line of cottonwoods marking the edge of his land. By the time they reached the barn, the world had vanished behind a curtain of dirt and wind. He helped her down, keeping one arm around her as they stumbled into the shelter of the building. Dust followed them in, swirling in the half-dark. She coughed hard, chest heaving, and he pulled a clean cloth from his saddlebag, pressing it into her hands. "Breathe through this," he said, voice rough from grit. She nodded, eyes glistening, and pressed the cloth over her mouth. He led her to the far corner where the air was a little clearer and helped her sit on a pile of clean hay. "Thank you," she rasped, voice barely a whisper. Owen knelt beside her. "You all right? Hurt anywhere?" She shook her head slowly. "Just lost. The wagon I was in overturned. I tried to follow the road, but I could not see." The driver yelled to run, then he was gone. Owen scanned her quickly. No blood, no broken bones, just a woman who had been through too much too fast. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked at him, dust clinging to her lashes. "Delia Rosemond." He gave a short nod. "Owen Prescott," she blinked, staring at him. "Prescott?" "Yeah," he said slowly. "Why?" Delia let out a tired, breathless laugh. "I was sent to marry an Owen Prescott. You—" Owen's brows pulled together. "You were the mail-order bride from Missouri," she nodded, and her lip trembled. "I had your letter. Your full name was on it. I had it in my pocket, but I think it blew away when the wagon tipped." He sat back on his heels, staring at her. In the chaos of the storm, in the middle of the open prairie, he had found her. The woman meant for him. "Well," he said, his voice quiet, "I reckon the storm did not want us to meet the usual way." Delia smiled faintly, brushing hair from her face. "You look different than the drawing you sent." "I look better or worse?" he asked, one corner of his mouth twitching. "Better," she said, cheeks flushing lightly. That did something to his chest. He stood and offered her his hand. "Come on, the house is not far. You need rest and a proper wash." She took his hand and rose carefully, leaning on him. "I am sorry I look so awful." "You look like someone who survived a Kansas dust storm," he said. "That is more than most can say." They made the short walk to the house, the storm still growling behind them. Inside, Owen led her to the small guest room, pulling a clean blanket from the trunk. "You can stay here," he said. "I will heat some water for washing." Delia looked around the little room, simple, clean, quiet. "You live here alone," he nodded. 6 years now, got the place after the war." Her gaze lingered on him. "You fought?" "Yeah," he said simply. My father did." "Never came back." Owen's throat tightened. "I am sorry." She nodded, eyes sad but steady. "Me too." He left her to rest and returned with a basin of warm water and a towel. She cleaned up in silence, then emerged in one of his clean shirts, her dress soaking in the wash basin. He handed her a cup of coffee and they sat on the porch, the storm now a distant rumble behind them. "I thought I was going to die out there," she said softly. "But you did not," he said. "You found me instead." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "I was terrified, then you came. You did not even ask who I was." "I was not about to let you disappear into that storm," he said. "I do not care if you were meant for me or not. I would have helped you." "But I was," she whispered, "meant for you." Owen's heart beat heavy in his chest. He reached out and gently took her hand. "I guess fate was not feeling subtle today," he said. Delia laughed, the sound soft and real. "It certainly was not." They sat together, fingers twined, watching the last of the dust settle over the prairie, and in that quiet, Owen realized something. He did not feel alone anymore. By evening, the wind had quieted to a low moan, and the land outside lay muted under a haze of settling grit. Owen had lit a single oil lamp in the kitchen, its glow casting soft shadows along the plank walls. Delia stood near the stove, hands wrapped around a tin cup of warm milk sweetened with molasses. Her hair was damp, pulled back with a strip of linen, and her borrowed shirt hung loosely over her frame, sleeves rolled to her elbows. Owen watched her from the table, elbows resting on the wood, calloused hands folded. He hadn't spoken in several minutes, letting the hush stretch between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, just still. I didn't think Kansas would be so fierce, Delia said finally, looking out the window at the faint stars. It's not always, he answered. But when it is, it doesn't ask permission. She gave a quiet nod. Then, after a pause, my uncle told me I'd be trading comfort for grit. I thought he meant hard work. I didn't think it would be quite so literal. Owen's mouth twitched, not a smile, not quite. You miss him. He raised me from the time I was 9, she said, voice low. His knees ached too much to manage the farm anymore, and I was, taking up space. He didn't say so, but I knew. You weren't unwanted, Owen said, tone firm but gentle. Delia turned from the window and came to sit opposite him. I didn't say that. No, but I've known that feeling. There's a difference between being left behind and being set aside. Neither's easy. She studied him for a long moment. Did someone leave you behind? He looked down, fingers tightening slightly. Not in the way you mean. I came back from Virginia in '65, nobody waiting. Folks had died off or moved on. House I grew up in wasn't standing anymore. Delia didn't speak right away. The silence between them shifted, not heavy, just full. I'm not afraid of work, she said at last. I can cook, so tend a garden. I've helped pull calves in the spring, and I know how to keep a fire going through the night. I didn't come here for ease. I didn't expect ease, Owen replied. But I didn't know if you'd want to stay once you saw it. She looked around the kitchen, the worn floorboards, the simple shelves, the pot of beans cooling on the stove. It's not polished, she said, but it's clean and it feels solid. He nodded once, then rose and took her empty cup. As he rinsed it in the basin, she rose too and crossed to the small shelf near the hearth. Her fingers brushed a worn leather-bound volume resting between a coil of twine and a jar of dried sage. You read poetry? She asked, lifting the book. When I can't sleep, he said without turning. That one's Whitman, was given to me by a chaplain I met near Petersburg. She opened to a page marked with a scrap of cloth and read silently for a moment. Then softly, I am large, I contain multitudes. She closed the book and set it back gently. I like that line. Owen dried his hands. He was trying to say men don't fit into one shape. Delia looked at him steadily. Do you believe that? I want to. She came a step closer. And what shape do you think I fit? He hesitated, then met her gaze. One I'm still learning. She didn't look away. I'd like to learn yours too, Owen exhaled slowly. You're not what I expected. I hope I'm not a disappointment. You're not, he said, and the words came without pause, quiet and sure. They stood there, the lamp flickering between them, shadows dancing up the walls. Outside, a coyote called low and lonely from the far ridge, and the wind had finally gone still. Delia glanced toward the narrow hallway that led to the guest room. I should sleep before the sun comes, he nodded. I'll be up early. If you're rested, I'll show you the barn, the root cellar, the rest. She hesitated, then touched his sleeve. Thank you for finding me. I didn't find you, he said. We just reached the same place at the same time. She didn't answer, but her fingers lingered a second longer before she withdrew them and stepped into the hall. Owen remained in the kitchen, hands braced on the edge of the table, the scent of dust and molasses still hanging in the air. He listened to the faint creak of floorboards as she settled into the room, and for the first time in years, the silence that followed didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like waiting, and waiting he could do. By first light, the prairie shimmered under a brittle hush, the air still heavy with yesterday's grit. Owen stepped out with a bucket and crossed the yard to the pump. The handle groaned as he worked it, water splashing into the tin pail. Behind him, the door creaked. He didn't turn right away, but he heard the tread of bare feet on the porch boards. Delia came to stand near the steps, her hair pulled into a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. She wore her dress again, still damp at the hem, but clean. The sleeves were rolled back, hands folded in front of her. You said you'd show me around, she said. I did. He carried the bucket past her, nodding toward the barn. You up for walking? I've walked farther on less sleep. Inside the barn, the horses shifted in their stalls. Owen set the bucket down and unlatched the gate to the first stall. The mare tossed her head once, then cried. She's called Mayfly, fast but stubborn. Delia reached out, palm open. The mare sniffed, then nudged her fingers. She's gentle, Delia said. She don't take to everyone. Delia ran her hand along the mare's neck, voice soft. Animals always know first who they can trust. Owen leaned against the stall door. You worked with horses before. My uncle kept two, one for plowing, one for temper. The second one threw me twice before it let me near without turning. That the one you liked best, she smiled briefly. Of course, he nodded once. I'll show you the root cellar, might as well see where everything's kept. They walked along the side of the house, passing under the cottonwoods. The cellar sat low in the ground, its wooden door damp with morning dew. Inside, the air was cool and still. Shelves lined the walls, jars sealed with wax, sacks of flour stacked in the corner. Delia stepped in and ran her fingers along a row of preserved beans. You put these up yourself, last fall, had help from a neighbor's boy. Is he still around? He joined a cattle drive in spring, left a note, but not much else. She looked over her shoulder. You keep many friends nearby, not many left, he said. Most folks move on, chasing bigger towns or easier land. Yet you stayed. I've had enough of moving. They emerged back into the sun, the light rising stronger now, making the dust on the grass shine like frost. She bent to touch a patch of sage growing near the well, rubbing a leaf between her fingers. You've got wildflowers starting up, she said. If you don't mind, I'd like to plant more near the porch, something that draws bees. He watched her closely. You thinking of staying long enough to see them bloom? She stood, brushing her hands on her skirt. That depends. On what? On whether there's space here for two, she said, meeting his eyes. Not just in the house, but in the way you live. Owen didn't speak right away. He stepped closer, the brim of his hat casting a line of shadow across his brow. I didn't send for a wife because I was lonely, he said. I sent for someone who'd stand beside me. That's different. Delia's voice was steady. And you think I can? I think you already are. She nodded slowly. I'm not made for softness, Owen. I've learned to carry weight in silence. I won't ask for comfort unless it's freely given. He reached out, hesitated, then touched her wrist. Then I'll give it before you ask. Her fingers turned into his, slow and sure. The touch between them wasn't urgent, but it held. I've never had someone say something like that to me, she said. Then maybe it's time you did. They stood there, the wind beginning to stir again, but softer now, threading through the grass instead of tearing at it. Delia glanced toward the porch. I'll start boiling water. You've got dust in your hair and a week's worth of sun on your neck. He let go of her hand slowly. You telling me I look rough? I'm telling you I'll see to it, she said and turned toward the house. Owen watched her walk away, the braids swinging against her back, the morning sun catching the faint edge of color returning to her cheeks. He went back to the barn, heart steady, hands sure. Something had shifted. Not all at once, not like a flash of lightning. But like the way prairie grass turns green again after a hard frost, quiet, certain, and lasting. By late afternoon, clouds had settled low and gray over the prairie, but the threat of rain held off. The air was cool, the kind that clung to the skin and made every sound wagon wheel, boot step, bird call feel sharper around the edges. Delia stood at the edge of Owen's garden plot, sleeves pinned back, hands buried in the black soil as she worked a row of young turnips free from the earth. The scent of loam and the rhythm of the task steadied her. Owen was near the fence line, mending a loose rail with long, deliberate hammer strokes. Neither had spoken since noon, but the quiet between them had settled into something companionable. She ran a dirt-smeared hand down her apron and called, "What happened to the shed behind the west field?" He didn't look up. "Collapsed under snow last winter. Roof was already going soft. I've been meaning to build it back." "Do you want help?" He set the hammer down and straightened. "You know woodwork? I know how to follow instruction." She stood and brushed grit from her skirt. "And I can lift more than I'm usually given credit for." Owen crossed the distance between them, thumbs hooked in his belt, gaze steady. "I'm not the kind of man who keeps a woman idle. But I also don't ask more than what's fair." Delia tilted her chin. I don't need you to soften the edges, just show me where I'm needed. Tomorrow morning then, he said. We'll haul the old boards and start fresh. She nodded, then stepped aside as he knelt to examine the turnips she'd gathered. His fingers, stained with pine sap and dust, moved with surprising care over the roots. You pulled these clean, he said. Didn't damage a one. I've learned to be precise, she replied. I had to. Owen looked up. What taught you that? Delia sat on the overturned crate near the edge of the plot. Making do with half enough. If I tore a hem, I had one spool of thread to fix it. If I ruined food, there wasn't more waiting. You learn not to waste what you can't replace. He studied her for a moment longer, then stood and picked up the basket. Come on. Let's get these washed before light fades. Inside, the kitchen smelled faintly of dried thyme and the faint iron scent of well water. Delia filled a basin while Owen set the basket beside her. She rolled up her sleeves again and reached for the first turnip. How long did you wait for me? She asked, voice quiet but steady. He dried his hands on a cloth. 3 weeks past the date you were supposed to come. I figured the wagon got delayed, or maybe you changed your mind. I thought you might have given up. I nearly did. She looked over, the water cool against her fingers. Why didn't you? Owen leaned back against the counter. Something told me to wait. A man doesn't ask for a wife unless he's ready to make room for her. And I'd already cleared space in the house in the days in my mind. Felt wrong to undo that before I knew for sure. Delia dropped the washed root into the bowl. It wasn't a small thing leaving Missouri, but I didn't hesitate. Not once, he nodded once. Then we were both certain. She turned back to the basin. I don't want a wedding dress. I've never owned anything like that. I didn't expect one. I want it quiet, just us, the land, and something honest said aloud. You'll have it. Delia met his eyes. And I want to keep my name, not because I don't want yours, but because I've carried it a long time and it never had much meaning until now. Owen's voice was low, sure. You can keep what you need. I'm not here to take anything from you. She watched him for a long moment before returning to the basin. The last turnip slipped beneath the water with a soft splash. I think I could be happy here, she said. Not someday, not if everything turns out right. Just now. He crossed to her, careful not to crowd, and placed his hand over hers in the water. His skin was warm, rough-edged, but there was no weight in the touch, only steadiness. You already are, he said. The basin sat forgotten between them as the light outside faded to a soft, silvery blue. Neither moved. There was no need. The moment had already settled itself into the foundation of the home they were beginning to build quietly and with both feet planted. The shed took shape by the end of the third day. Owen cut the last board with a steady hand while Delia held it firm against the sawhorse. Sweat darkened the back of his shirt, and her sleeves were smudged with pine dust, but there was a quiet satisfaction between them that needed no naming. Frame's firm, Owen said, pausing to wipe his brow with the crook of his arm. Roof'll hold better than the last. Delia stepped back and studied their work. We could hang dried herbs from those beams. Keep them out of the sun but close to the kitchen. That your way of claiming it? He asked, not teasing, just curious. She nodded. If I'm going to keep house here, I figure the corners should belong to me too. You don't have to ask, he said. You live here same as I do. She handed him a nail to finish the brace. I'm not asking, just telling you how I plan to use the space. He smiled then, not with his mouth, but in the way his eyes settled on her like he'd found something he hadn't known he'd needed. Later, inside, she heated water on the stove while Owen cleaned up at the pump. The wind had picked up again, but it was warm this time, carrying the scent of damp grass and distant lilac. She stood at the window, watching him roll his sleeves and comb his fingers through his hair. He moved with the same quiet purpose he used when splitting logs or tying a lead rope, deliberate, without waste. When he stepped back inside, his boots left faint prints on the floorboards and his hair was still wet at the crown. You hungry? She asked, turning back to the stove. I've got beans warming and I pulled the last of the cornbread from the tin. I could eat, he said, but I'd rather sit with you over her shoulder. You've got something on your mind. He moved to the table and pulled a small bundle wrapped in brown cloth from his pocket. I went into town this morning before you were up, took the mare out early. She dried her hands, heart lifting and tightening at once. Why? He set the bundle in front of her. Because I meant what I said about marrying honest. You deserve something to mark it. Delia unfolded the cloth. Inside was a thin gold ring, simple, smooth, and warm from his hand. Her breath caught. I told you I didn't want a dress, she said. You didn't say anything about a ring. She looked up at him, eyes shining. Owen, I know it's plain, he said, voice low, but it's all I had to give when I walked into that store, and I wanted you to have it before we speak vows. She reached for his hand and pressed the ring into his palm. Then put it on me yourself. He stood, came around the table, and took her hand in his. Her fingers were roughened from soil and work just like his. No lace, no flowers, no crowd. Just two people standing on worn floorboards beneath a roof they both kept up. He slid the ring onto her finger. There, he said. She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her against his chest. They married the next morning, beneath the cottonwoods near the edge of the field, with only the preacher from town and a pair of blackbirds for witness. Delia wore her usual dress with a clean apron, and Owen had brushed the dust from his boots. When they joined hands, he squeezed hers once, and she returned it without hesitation. I've walked through storms, she said, voice steady, and crossed a dry land to find you. I choose this life. I choose you. Owen answered quietly, and I choose you. I'll carry what needs carrying and leave space for what you bring. The preacher's voice faded into the wind as they kissed. There was nothing hurried in it, just the slow certainty of two people who had already walked through enough weather to know what mattered. They spent the rest of the day building a fence along the pasture's far edge. That evening, as the sun dipped low, they sat on the porch with mugs of coffee and their boots resting near each other on the steps. The ring caught the last light of day, a soft gleam against Delia's hand. He reached over and laced his fingers with hers. You ever think, she said, about what might have happened if the storm hadn't hit? If the wagon hadn't broken? I do, he said. And then I stop, because it doesn't matter now. No, she said. It doesn't. In the weeks that followed, they planted onions and beans, strung wire along the fence line, and cleaned out the loft above the barn. Delia carved shelves for the herbs she dried, and Owen built her a stool for the kitchen so she could sit when her knees ached. They argued once, when the water pump jammed and she tried to fix it herself. He'd raised his voice without meaning to, worried more than angry. She'd gone silent, then told him plainly that she didn't need protecting from the life she'd chosen. He'd apologized by splitting enough firewood to last through winter,